that was pretty cool. I just sorry. Hey, this is explaining the unexplainable, and I'm here with my co-host, Bishop Dr. Joshua Sparks, and we have an incredible guest. We have a really incredible guest. I'm so excited that he is with us today. And we've already kind of had a deja vu moment because we've already kind of been on and then off and then on. And now we're back on. And we have from Paranormal Portal, Brent Thomas. Brent Thomas!
Yay. Welcome, Brent.
Here, hold on. I got this.
I love it. I love it. So wonderful.
Thanks for having me on. I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
That's so awesome. So like I was saying, we've already been talking, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes. But it wasn't actually on. So we are getting to, this is like just a little, whoa.
Well,
we don't know.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me.
No, now we've got to explain what just happened.
Okay.
I don't know. We'll try to figure it out.
It was the unexplainable. Really was unexplainable. But I do know that we could actually have Brent explain a little bit about himself to start the show off. That would be great.
Well, I can say that I am the creator and host of the Paranormal Portal, which is actually two shows. It's both a YouTube live stream, which are 2-hour shows on every Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday on YouTube, Facebook Live, X, what's the other, Rumble, and Twitter, and Twitch. Twitch and X. I always say Twitter, and I got to keep reminding myself it's X now. But I also create a weekly podcast, which is of the same name. So it's Paranormal Portal as well, which is available on all of the platforms. And that is hosted through Libsyn, which is the company that manages my podcast. So they're two very different shows, but they all deal with the paranormal. And the podcasts are generally more interview based. Like I'll talk to a person about their experiences, or an author, or researchers, or sometimes they are media personalities. So that's what the Paranormal Portal is, and that's what I'm doing.
I've been on there. It's one of my favorites. I love that. I love that interview. Thank you for having me on your show.
Oh, it was wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful. And I love, that's the thing that I really love about doing it. Like when I first started, I was like, and it's funny because I was a late bloomer and was like, suddenly I had this epiphany. I had a friend who ran an internet radio station called Truth Frequency Radio. And it's just, we were working, he was contracting to a company I worked at, and just suddenly this epiphany happened. I want to do a show. And it was like, everything about the show came to me like instantly. It's like, oh, it's going to deal with paranormal. It's going to be this. Even the name just popped into my head, like Paranormal Portal. That was going to be the name. And, but I really thought, I know this stuff. I can do this standing on my head. But then you start doing this stuff and you start going down the rabbit holes of this stuff, and you realize I didn't know anything. I was not prepared. And it's a journey of, I think the beauty of this stuff, and I've said this forever, but I think the beauty of it is that a lot of times people dismiss the paranormal. They're just like, oh, that's just where things are weird. That was that glitchy, weird stuff that happens in reality. But yeah, I think it's demonstrating a more complete nature of the reality we live in, that, with all of our hubris and all of our arrogance, we're like, oh, we got this stuff figured out. But it's showing us that we have a lot to learn, that this reality we live in is incredibly dynamic and fluid. It's not a box. It's not concrete. It's not rigid. It is flowing, and it has, there's so many aspects to it that we don't understand yet. And that's what I think this stuff brings to us, is it shows us we have a lot to learn.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're so poetic too. That's why I just enjoy listening to you, because, you just have a great way of talking, and it's well,
Oh,
honestly, I mean, if you think about it, like just Bishop Joshua's like that's what his something about his voice. It's just and on the Paranormal Portal podcast, he'll take these unusual stories and he'll read them. And it's like you just feel, I don't know, I just feel kind of comforted when I'm listening to him reading the stories. And I even said to him, I texted on the show, I said, I bet that's really great how you read to your children at night or something. And he goes, I really don't read to my children.
I really don't. It's
And I was like, I was
I,
thinking,
I, I guess it's always weird hearing yourself. When I first started doing it, I was like, "Ooh, I sound like that," but you get used to it. I mean, you get used to hearing yourself. But I was surprised by that actually when I started doing the show. They were like, "Oh, you have such a nice voice." It's like, really? Oh, good. Tell that to my wife. No, I'm just kidding. But I also get emails where people are like, "Oh, your voice is calming, and I listen to you when I go to sleep. It puts me right to sleep." And I'm like, "No, that's not what I'm going for here. That's not what I want." But I know it's complimentary. It's nice that people enjoy listening to me. So that's a really big bonus. But I never would have guessed that people thought that my voice was okay. Because
it is, and then so that's why I called him. He was the first person that I wanted to have for the documentary, which was just in my mind, and he said yes, and so it's so I feel like it's a movie. He said yes.
oh no, I was honored. I mean, it was a very nice thing to be a part of that, to be a part of your dream and realizing your vision. If and I didn't have a huge role in it, but they're very thrilled to do it because that meant a lot to me that you wanted me to be part of that. So thank you so much.
Well, you may not realize this, but you're in it a little bit more than you may know.
Oh,
Because I actually added more for so it'll be a big surprise when you actually see it. There are things in there
nice.
that you will be quite surprised.
Oh, that's sweet. That's good.
Yeah,
However I'm able to contribute was awesome. I mean, it's fun to be a part of things like that. So the fact that you found my inclusion to be a good thing is just wonderful. Thank you.
yeah, thank you. And I'm so excited because let's just say we have some people watching. We've got Richard. Hi, Richard. We've got Mac. Hi, Mac. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm still waiting to find out, but it did get distribution, so we're waiting to get it. So it's going out in this little network of distribution. So as soon as I hear what it's doing, then we can all actually watch it. So it's been a long time coming. So I'm really excited. So I just want to keep moving forward though. So Bishop
Sure.
Joshua, I know that you had some questions for Brent. Were some of those questions?
Well, the first thing I think that a lot of people would like to know is, anybody that has any type of experience in paranormal activity and uh, anybody that has witnessed paranormal activity or has dealt with people who have investigated or studied paranormal activities in a home or in a building or a business or uh, the number one question I always get is, "Hey, Doc, what qualifies as true paranormal activity versus misinterpretation of natural events?" So, what would you say, Brent, in your experience? What qualifies as a true paranormal activity?
It's kind of it's a tough thing to actually nail down, but I think certainly disembodied actions are a big one, like in hauntings and stuff. When you have looked at all of the mundane explanations, if you can successfully go through and categorically debunk not wind, not any other. I mean, there's so many different types of anomalies, but let's just say a door is shutting. Well, the first thing you do is you check the air movement, the airflow. You compare it against other doors opening and closing, looking for the whole vacuum effect. And if you can successfully remove all of those and account for windows and any kind of air circulation as not being the culprit, then I think that it qualifies. I mean, is there any one way to sum up what paranormal is? No, because there's so many different types of paranormal events. You have the non-physical, you have very physical, like in the cryptids and UFOs and such. And there's any number. The big thing is that I guess I really look at this stuff like you have to examine it with the eyes of a skeptic, though, because I don't think confirmation bias does us any good. When you'll see, like, on the internet is one example, like, how many pictures of ambiguous leaf pictures have you seen where, oh, there's faces all over? Well, I mean, that's pareidolia, and we have a tendency to look for familiarity in random chaotic scenes. But I forgot where I was going with this, but just essentially, there's so many different things that could qualify as paranormal, but the causality and the possible root of it is anybody's guess, because we really don't know what we're dealing with any of this stuff. It's like there are some people that like to pat themselves on the back and say, well, I'm an expert of, and insert the phenomena. Well, unless you've actively studied something and had, the ability to do repeatable tests and try different approaches, we just don't know what we're dealing with. Like, just for instance, you have a spiritual encounter. Well, I think it's my Uncle Phil. Well, how do you know that? How do you know it's Phil? How do you know Phil is hanging around in your closet? And why would Phil hang around in your closet? And then, well, I hear Phil's voice. Well, does it's still, there's so many variables in all of this. But I think, trying to get back to your root question, because it's almost impossible for me to answer. But I would just say that any event where you actively compare it and challenge it against any number of mundane explanations, and you can find no cause or reason for it, then I would say that that's paranormal. I mean, paranormal is, almost by definition, anything that's not normal. Well, if my water bottle tips over, that's not normal. It shouldn't do that, but it did. And I can say, well, there's no wind, nothing knocked it over, nothing fell against it. So that now is paranormal. The lights in the sky. It doesn't appear to be any aircraft. You can look up the satellites and check it against motions, and run any challenges against it that would sum it up as a mundane event. And if you can remove those, then you're looking at something paranormal. If my cat gets up in my face and says I love you, that's going to be paranormal too, because that doesn't normally happen. So it's such a huge umbrella of possibility for what is paranormal. How'd I do?
You've done great. Wonderful answer.
And then you've got the portal too. So you've got, like, you could say almost like, what is a paranormal portal? I mean, like, the portal comes through, things come through the portal. Why did you choose to name that show, your show, Paranormal Portal?
Well, I'd love to say that I'm an expert on portals, but honestly, the name came to me. I wish I could take credit for it, but it literally came to me. It came into my head like, this is what it's going to be called. Like, it was given to me, and I was like, that's what it's going to be called. I love the name. I just felt right. And so that's what I went with. But, again, that's another thing that can we quantify what a portal is? No. I can't. I mean, and it's possible that there are theoretical physicists or other people of science that could give some kind of explanation to what a portal would be. I don't pretend to know, but there does seem to be events where certain areas of activity are just way off the charts, and it would seem to suggest that there's some kind of energetic event happening there regularly. So is that a side of a portal? And it could be. Again, I would just caution anybody, if anybody tells you they have the answers, they're not being absolutely honest with you, or they may really think they do, but I would challenge that, because how can we know the answers for something that we cannot actively study? The thing with the paranormal or any of this unusual stuff is it doesn't have a schedule. It's not like, not like a calendar event. Every beginning of every work week, that's a Monday. We can study what Monday is. We can look at how it affects people and what it does to their psychology, what it does for them in interpersonal relationships, etc. But we don't know when Uncle Phil's going to show up again from the closet, or the UFO is going to fly over the front yard. You just don't know, and so you can't really actively study anything. And it's the interesting thing about this stuff is it can vary from person to person, and I think that has a lot to do with the people experiencing it. Like, a lot of times people aren't, I mean, they have no idea something's going to happen, and it happens. But there are some people that seem so much more prone to experiencing the paranormal. And some people that are skeptics may say, well, that obviously shows you there's a psychological predisposition for them to misinterpret reality, or for them to have flights of fancy or whimsical ideas, and any like the main character syndrome of sort of thing. But maybe it's just that they are energetically resonating a little bit different from people, or their perceptions are a little tuned differently, and so they can perceive those things a lot, like what we would call sensitives. And I think there's that everybody has a tendency or a propensity for being a sensitive. It's just not everybody is tuned into being sensitive. I think that there are some people that are just born with those switches on. That's just their life experiences. They're wide open and they're getting stuff all the time. There are other people that can devote themselves, I think, to practice and following certain regimens and ideas into developing a sensitivity. And I also think that another aspect of that is that I think by virtue of being exposed to this stuff, it does introduce a sensitivity to the experiencers. Because one thing that seems really clear is that if you've had one paranormal event, you seem to be so much more likely to have more of them. Well,
Right.
what happened? It was like something opened up, something changed for that person, for the observer. It was a transformative event. And that's more than just their worldview or their identity, or whatever. It could be physiological, it could be neurochemical, it could be that there's an energy effect that it has. It opens pathways in the mind. It might trigger some part of our dormant genetic DNA. Who knows how or why that happens. But I don't know, am I talking too much?
You're
No.
doing fine. Everything in the universe is based on frequencies and
Yeah.
vibrations, and we're all energy. And sometimes I think that uh, those beyond the veil are making an attempt, or trying to make an attempt, to prove that there is existence after this thing that we called life. And just as much as we want to prove that there is an existence after this thing we call life, after death. And I was talking to a person the other day in our office, and he's the husband of one of the ladies that works with us that came through our program. And he told me about an event that took place at a house that they were living in, and they used to see these ghosts, these apparitions that were
Mhm.
dressed in 16th century clothing, and they'd always walk through the house, and they would see them periodically. But one day he was sitting on the bed, and he was looking right at these people, and she looked at her husband and said, he can see us and he can hear us. So it was kind of a shock to them too, because there'd been so many interactions where they was unrecognized, or they just played it off, or just went about their business. And this time the people actually said, hey, he can actually see us and hear us. So sometimes I think they're just as much desirous to contact us as we are to contact them.
Right.
Thank
Or
you. Thank you for saying that,
yeah.
because I mean, I always feel like people are always saying, "Oh, if you are seeing them, well, then they are, they're either like manipulating you or whatever." But I
Mhm.
honestly, from everything I have seen, yes, they can do that. But what you're saying, Brother Joshua, is what I experienced more, I think, than anything. Is like they're like it's so surprised that we see them. I'm like, you see me, I see you. That's
Mhm.
I mean, so thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think sometimes we forget, that the people that do leave this existence and go to another plane, go to heaven, go into the spirit realm, they still exist. just as much as we exist on this side. And just as sure as there's benevolent spirits, there are malevolent spirits. We deal with them on the unseen realm. We,
Right.
as an exorcist, we deal with evil spirits, and not all spirits are evil. And you can
Mm,
tell the difference. You can tell the difference from the vibration and the energy and the frequencies that we feel off of these different spirits.
yeah.
And I think a lot of the things that goes into not only being an exorcist, but working in the paranormal field has a lot to do with are we open minded? Are we so close minded that we are not willing to take suggestions from other people who may be able to help us explain the unexplainable, explain what we're experiencing in our life, and help us through their research
Right.
to make that connection? And why is it that they're trying to connect with us? What is the reason behind that? Do they need help to move on? Is there something in our life they're trying to communicate to us concerning that we need to understand, that we may not be listening clear enough to our angels, our God, and God sends them to bring a message to us. I believe that things like that happen. Look at the prophet Samuel when King Saul went to the witch of Endor, and she called him up, and Samuel came and told Saul, "Hey, you are in trouble, Saul. You've done things that you shouldn't do, and the judgment of God's coming." So I mean, sometimes we connect with spirits in that way. And just a quick event that happened in my life. I was in a place where I was working, Brent, and this young lady came in. And when she came in, I've never met this young lady before. And immediately when I seen her, my mind went to this location, and I seen this young man wearing a white jacket, had a pair of blue jeans on, laying between two buildings. And this young man was dead when I seen him. And he stood up. He told me his name was Chris. And he told me to tell his sister that he did not die from an overdose, but he was murdered. I did not know that the young lady in the office was his sister.
Wow.
And I asked her who Chris was, and she just kind of, her face went as white as a sheet. She said,
Yeah.
"That's my brother." I said, "Was Chris found deceased?" She said, "Yeah, they said he had a drug overdose." I said, "No, Chris was murdered." She said, "Oh my God, I thought that." And she started crying. Sometimes I think that maybe the spirits reach out to us to get some kind of closure, not just for themselves, but for their families as well. We need to
Yes.
be open minded.
Yes. I,
Oh,
I think it I think it's also important to that some of these experiences though, we might be the ghosts to them.
True.
And so I'm fascinated, and I certainly agree with everything you just said. There does seem to be an active effort on their part to come through in a lot of different ways, but I think sometimes they're not really dead and we're not really dead because perhaps it's a time slip or some closer variation. There's been several accounts of like there was this one account I covered years ago, and the guy had this old farmhouse, and it was like from the 1700s or whatever. And he had made the basement was his kind of workshop storage area or whatever, and the rest of the house had been modified through the ages or whatever, but the basement was pretty much the same. And he went down there. He was going to go work at something in his downstairs workshop. He went down to the bottom of the steps and turned, and there, standing adjacent to him on the other side of the basement, was this translucent figure in old period clothing, and the figure was looking at him like, and he looked at it going, and they both took off different directions. But he was convinced he was the ghost for this person, and of course the ghost was a ghost for him, and it makes you wonder if some of
oh,
these encounters aren't some sort of maybe, I don't know, maybe I believe that so I believe in the possibility that there's something called non-Euclidean space-time. Have you guys heard of that? And this,
no.
okay, so essentially the concept, at least in terms of time, and of course space would be another aspect of this, but that all the moments of all of existence from the very beginning, like just for instance in our understanding, the Big Bang to the eventual collapse of the universe, are and everything in between, the dinosaurs, The Wright brothers, the Titanic, to SpaceX, Elon Musk, all this stuff, and into, wherever, are all happening in this one infinite now. And it's not time that's moving, but it's us moving through experience and perceiving it as time. So, in other words, that the idea is that it's all happening now. The moment you first took your first breath after being born to the moment that you're taking your last breath are all happening in this one momentous now. But it's our perception of time, which may or may not be an actual thing, is us moving through the experience of this existence. So is it possible that there are moments or spaces or places where those timelines kind of merge in somewhat of a sense, and we may perceive spirits and they may perceive us as spirits? There was one case out of the Conjuring house, and it was the Perrin family. And I heard this story from Mike Ricksecker, and he was talking about one of the Perrin family was in their house, and this house had been around, I guess, since the 1700s. And she said that she went into the kitchen, but suddenly the kitchen looked different. What she saw was this old fireplace, this old stone fireplace. And in front of the fireplace, there's a fire in the fireplace, and in front of the fireplace were like two or three people just sitting there relaxing in front of the fire. And she walked in and she's like, "Oh my God." And apparently one of the guys looks over and goes, "Huh." And he knocks one of the other ones and said, "Will you look at that?" And like they were seeing her as the spirit. So I don't know. I mean, it gets to be really hard to even try to conceptualize, but I think there's certainly merit for all possibilities in this.
Wasn't there a TV show where a woman kept dreaming about a house and seeing herself in this dream house, and then she kept seeing a woman in this dream, and the woman appeared to be like a ghost in her dream. And the funny thing about it is that she went to see this house that was on the market that was her dream home. She came to the house where the lady who was selling it was showing the house. They both seen each other because they were both dreaming about each other. And she's like, "Hey, you're the ghost of my dreams." And she said, "No, you're the ghost of my dreams." So it was some kind of it was a true story, but it was a reenactment
Right.
of the story. But,
Wow.
I've always thought that was fascinating. And what you just said, I've thought about quite a bit.
Yeah.
Maybe there's an overlapping of times, and
Sure.
it,
Yep.
makes a whole lot of sense. It really does.
It kind of does. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it does. I think that's the amazing part of this, and it's like a big onion that you start peeling back the layers and you realize there's a lot more onion under this. I got a lot more onion to get through before I can understand any of this, but it's fascinating to think of possibilities. And I think, really, it just makes you appreciate that. Again, getting back to my earlier point, we got a lot to learn. We really don't know much, and we like to pat ourselves on our backs with how far we've come, and we've come a long way. And there's some people have done some amazing things, and certainly that there's no discarding that, but I think we got a lot further to go than we ever thought.
Right. Well, one of the things that, has happened here on this property is all the children. I mean, there's been adults we've seen,
Yeah.
but I mean, I've seen these children. We've heard the children. I mean, many people have heard them. Many people have seen them. Like the one just walked right into the cabin in the morning at 7 a.m. on a Sunday, woke the family that was in there up. And I did not add this into the documentary, but that later they called me and they said, "Hey, what was that kid doing here?" And I said, "The kid was not dressed really in a period clothing this time. They usually are. This
Yeah.
one had more like, just he looked like a regular kid, right? With sandy blonde hair, about 6 years old." And they're like, what was he doing in our house or in the morning? And I'm like, there was nobody here. I mean, our gates are locked. We have two solid giant gates. Nobody can get in. It was a
Right.
kid. Nobody was here. And I mean, but they all saw him. They all saw him.
Oof.
And he he just kind of floated. I don't know if he floated, but he just went backwards, they said, because he said, you just need to go on and go. And, I'm thinking that's kind of strange too. But so then the boy opened the door, right? And then he stood there looking at everybody, and then he just went backwards and the door shut.
Oh,
And,
wow.
but and the other odd thing was usually that particular morning, one of the family members was watering because they always water early in the morning, and he was literally pretty much in that area, like where this was happening around, and there was no boy, of course, but like he didn't even see that either. So
Huh.
that, to me, I don't know if he was then out there the same moment that happened, but I just thought that was just so bizarre. And that's how they work, though. I mean, that's they somehow can come into um, our reality. I mean, I've seen it many times, I've experienced it
Sure.
with my clients, but it's as if, like, you guys are talking about, like, they have a message. There's usually a message that they are trying, especially with what I'm doing. It's like they try to tell us something, but there have been tricks too. So, Brent, have you ever experienced anything where in your own life where you feel like tricks have been played on you or anything at all?
Yeah, actually, yeah, the this house. I mean, I've lived in several houses that were active personally, and had just a ton of ghostly experiences. In fact, I'm sure that I'm forgetting more than I'll ever remember. It's just as time goes on, it's
Right.
kind of the thing. But there was this one this one outlet that was like oozing this red liquid, and it wasn't didn't look like blood, but it looked like there was some kind of weird funky thing going on the walls. And I
Mm.
called the I don't own the house here, I just rent, so I called the company, and they did a maintenance check, and they came out and tore it out, and there was nothing in there. But I had been wiping continually this red oozing liquid, and then they went in and looked at the outlet. It looks bone dry, and looking around in the wall, and there's nothing. I mean, this is an old house. This house is built, I think, the turn of the 20th century. So it's and this is I live in the north of Idaho, so up here that's plenty old. Outside of mining encampments, like these old houses up here aren't like on the East Coast where you go back to like the 1600s, but it's
Right.
old for up here. But it's had a lot of history. I know there's plenty of tragedies that have happened in this house. One of which I know for sure, and I didn't know. We moved into this house, and I'd lived in plenty of active houses before, so it was like, oh yeah. And I didn't know if it was something I was encountering or if it was something that I've been dragging along. I mean, I just kind of have gotten so used to it, and it's not like dark and evil ever. It's just like there. But I was where was I going with this? There was a couple of things that running through my head as I'm telling this, but that outlet they tore apart, nothing, and then as soon as they reassembled it, it never did it again. Now, just recently, there's some outlets that or some light switches that won't work for me. They'll work fine for my wife and 9-year-old child, but they won't work for me. It'll be like I'll turn it on and it'll flicker, and then go off. It's like, yeah, and I thought, oh, I gotta look at that switch. So I've changed out the switch, changed out the light bulbs, and still, it just doesn't want to. It just like dicks with me all the time, and I'm like, oh, come on, knock it off. And there was something else that I was really going to tell you, though. I was kind of excited to bring it up. But I've seen a lot of various. Oh, I was going to tell you the story of this house. So I've had a lot of different things happen in this house, and some creepy, some most of it's just mischievous. And I didn't really know what was going on here, but I was I have a neighbor friend who was an elderly lady, and she's a lovely, beautiful woman. And I've gone over and like helped her with yard work and things like that. But I got to meet her daughter, who is she's like a Wiccan, and so I had her come over and be on the show. Or she was from Portland, and she came over and was on the show, and just a wonderful person as well. But she's in here, and she's like, so how do you like living here? And she grew up next to this house. And I said, oh, I said, it's good, but it's kind of an interesting house. She goes, well, you know what happened there, didn't you? No, I don't know what happened here. So, and it's really a heartbreaker. So apparently, when she was in like high school, there was a kid that was living here that was about 14 years old and suffering from depression and going through some stuff, I guess. And I guess he ate a 12 gauge upstairs in this house. It's like, oh, well, that explains a lot.
Oh
So,
my God.
it is sad, but it enabled me to look at the activity over here with more of a compassion. Like, okay, so obviously this person is probably still here and is still working through whatever that is. And I've often thought, what is it like to be a ghost? What is it like to be a spirit? And you see people around that are in spaces, but you're sitting there in essentially in isolation. And what kind of a head bake would that be? We know what isolation will do to a living person. It'll drive you nuts. I mean, the people go crazy by being ignored, and they just wither, and they don't do well. And I'm thinking, well, but I was able to turn the concern for this place more into a compassionate, like, okay, well, now I understand it. And it changed the nature of the experience in this house. Just me knowing that, it was like, okay. And it settled down. I mean, there's still some things that happen just because things happen, but I don't look at it in a dark and horrible way anymore, or potentially dark and horrible, because when you got weird things happen, it's like, where did we just move in? Is this the Amityville house we're renting here? You don't know. So there were times when it'd feel real dark and real, like, I don't know, not like evil, because I've been to places where I felt absolute evil, and that's a sobering thing. But it wasn't like that. But it was just like empty and hollow and just like,
Hmm.
you know what I mean. I don't know how to explain it. What would be a good word to put in there? But that's what it felt like. Now, after knowing, it was like, oh, I can at least understand what could be a large part of what's going on here. And it did change the nature of it for me. And I still live here. We live here. We lived here for about a decade now. But it was an interesting thing to find out that had happened here. And obviously, some states you don't have to say. Some states you do, but this isn't obviously one of them. So no. So I
Would
found
that,
out.
do you think that would have changed your mind had you not, had you
Not
known?
not for me personally, but I mean, it might have changed once my youngest child came along. It might have changed my willingness to be here, and because you don't know what, is it possible that something drove this child to do that? Is it
Yeah.
possible that he was being acted on by something that could still be an issue here? So I mean, all of those things, of course, would be a consideration. But I, like I said, I've lived in plenty of places where there was a lot of activity. So
I was just remembering how we've talked about the shadow man, which, and you said that you would see that shadow, certain shadow man, which I've seen the shadow man, and they're
mhm.
similar. But you said your son had also seen the shadow man.
Not my youngest son yet. So here's
Oh,
the
this
story to
one.
that. So my experiences with it, I mean, I've regularly seen the shadows out of the corner of the eyes thing. That's just always happened throughout the course of my life. But the experience with this guy, and I want to explain first of all what this guy looked like. Um, he was old, but he wasn't like thin and old and frail, but he looked like the creepy preacher from Poltergeist 2. If you're familiar with that movie.
Oh,
Oh, that guy was horrifying.
Are
And
you
yeah.
that,
lost, sweetheart? Are you scared?
yeah,
Oh,
are
that's
you in
good.
the holy temple? It's like, oh Lord. So
Oh,
that's what he looked like, but he didn't look as emaciated as that guy. But he had a really creepy vibe. And I didn't see him as being awake, but I was plagued in my dreams, and every dream would be the same thing. I would be asleep and suddenly be aware, uh-oh, there's something horrible is going on here. And then I would see the tall, shadowy man with the wide brimmed hat, and
yeah.
he would be coming, and he would be coming for me. And I knew in the dream that he was coming for me. but no matter what I did, I could not get away with this from this man. Very pale, white hair, and always like smug, like you can't escape me, you can't get away from me. There's nothing you can do. And in my dreams, they would be very lucid. Like I would imagine, like I could, activate this like superhuman powers. I could fly, I could climb up wherever I went. He would be there waiting and just mocking me, like you can't get away from me, you cannot get away from me. And it was horrifying. I wake up just, and then like, oh, thank God I'm awake. Thank God I'm awake. And I went through this for a number of years through my teen years. And then after my teen years, it just stopped. I was like, well, guess I got away from him. But it was my oldest son. He was living with me when he came to live with me full time. He and his mom, his mom were he myself and his mother were divorced, and so I was like a weekend dad. But when he was 12, he came to live with me all the time. And it wasn't long after he's like, Dad, I'm having these really weird dreams. I've had them several times. I'm like, wait, did you see the man in black with the wide brim hat, the white hair? He goes, yes, that's the guy, and I can't get away from him. I'm like, wow. So that was concerning, of course. That's concerning. And I talked with him, and he got through it. It ended for him as well. And then my middle son came up to me when he was a teenager and said, Dad, I'm having weird dreams. I'm like, uh-oh. And I explained, is it the man in black with the wide brim hat, white hair? Yeah, and I can't get away from him.
That's
So
so
all
weird.
three of us were tormented by this guy, whatever this guy is. And I don't know. And maybe it's, maybe, I mean, it felt scary though. So I think that it was probably not a good thing, right? But it was like I was being pursued, and then my son, and then my next son. Now I have a 9-year-old, and I'm bracing for the day when he's going to say, Dad, I'm having these dreams, and we'll have to talk. But yeah, it's certainly an unusual thing.
Bishop Joshua, like if this was a question on the unseen realm, what would you think that was? It's very unusual.
Well, it sounds to me like there's some kind of a vexation, maybe some kind of a curse or a hex that's been attempted to be
Mhm.
placed on you or your family through some form of witchcraft or some form of black magic or something dark, that's been presupposed on you and your family for from some time. And it may not be just on you. It may not have started with you. It could go back into your family history. I've dealt with a lot of people that have seen this man. Now, and it's amazing that so many people give the same description of this shadowy figure,
Yeah.
with the big top hat and
Yeah.
the long cloak. And you know
Yes.
I walked into the house where I work. I'm a therapist in a drug alcohol rehabilitation facility. We're a dual diagnosis clinic. We take care of not just substance abuse but mental health issues as well. And they said, brother Josh, we seen a shadow figure in the house last night.
Mm.
So we rebuked it today when we prayed. I rebuked it and told it to leave the house. But it seems like it follows people. It's an oppressing spirit that follows people, and
Yeah.
that's what oppression is. It's not necessarily the same as possession. There's a lot of differences, a lot of variables that make them different. But oppression, it happens a lot of times to attachment because the word sorcery in Revelation chapter 21 verse 8 is the Greek word pharmakia, where we get the English word pharmacy from. So
Oh.
Satan attaches himself to people through drug use and alcohol use, and I think a lot of times that's why they see these shadowy figures, is because it's some type of an attachment. But not with your case. I don't think that has anything to do with that. But sometimes I have found that if you go back in your family history, that there's some kind of a hex or a vex or
Mm.
some kind of a chain or something that's trying to be placed on your family for whatever reason it may be. And that was not a ghost that just walked behind me. That was my wife. She appeared and disappeared. Uh, but I think at times that that is one of the explanations that I've found to be true. And other times it's um, And I don't think it's something random. I don't think it's hysteria. I don't think that
Mhm.
it's an imagination that you had that you presupposed on your sons and it's something that they dreamed about. I think it's something very real. Just like, we talked about shadow people a lot, and some people may not know what shadow people are. But when someone asks me, what's your definition of a shadow person, and I always give them this standard definition: it's a mysterious, dark humanoid figure, often seen in peripheral vision or as a fleeting apparition. And I've seen them, you've seen them. I think everybody has seen them. One time or another. My cousin tells a story when he was working as an apprentice in a funeral home.
Mhm.
And the apartment he lived in, you had to go through the funeral home and go upstairs past the preparation room. And he had to go up these long steps, and he could feel something watching him as he walked through the funeral home. And of course, I've worked in the funeral home for years. I used to sleep in the room next door to the prep room so that I could walk out into the garage and get in the removal vehicle and go pick up a body. It didn't bother me. I never had any real scary experiences in the funeral home. But this day, my cousin was going to open the door, and he felt something run its finger from the top of his seat of his pants all the way up his back. And he
Ooh.
said, "Man, I didn't think I could open the door that fast, but I got the heck off that stairwell."
Oh my God.
Wow.
I would have
Oh,
probably used the bathroom on myself, to be honest with you.
oh my God.
Yeah, that's intense.
Well, you know what? It kind of makes me wonder if this isn't almost a time stamp, like a stamp, um, like kind of like the curse or something, but you seem to always work through it. Like it's
Mhm.
through yourself, through the each son, and hopefully not the little one. But it is interesting. It's like almost like a pattern in time, which I always find that stuff fascinating. It's like when I look at time frames and time stamps, it blows me away how I'll like all of a sudden 1 year ago, just the other day, our 501c3 started. But we didn't even think about that because when Joe's show started, which is the 501c3, it was like the same week. I mean, that's just one thing. I mean, this happens all the time where all of a sudden I'm like, how is that possible that it's the same day, the same a year later or 2 years later, when the same event reoccurs itself?
Mhm.
I mean, isn't that similar to what's happening in a way, you guys, with Brent?
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
almost like a portal of time, almost like a portal.
almost like they're interdimensional beings.
Right.
The entities from other dimensions, momentarily phasing into our what we call reality. But I was thinking about something else too. I just wanted to ask you: in these events, did you ever have any type of sleep paralysis? Did you experience anything like that?
Mm.
Not until much later. There was a period of about 2 years that I suffered pretty regularly from sleep paralysis, and
Oh,
that was much later. And I always had the feeling of someone standing there doing it. The whole thing. I do believe there's a clinical type of sleep paralysis. I don't think this was it.
right.
But I'll tell
Different.
you the only thing that broke it for me was once I learned how to break myself out of sleep paralysis. It was almost like being in a boot camp of sorts. Like, regularly I'd just be like, "Oh God, I'm stuck again. I'm stuck again." And what do you do? And I would try everything, like breathing extra hard because I could still move my lungs. I could move my eyes to a degree, but I couldn't. Like, my wife would be sleeping next to me and like, maybe I can wake her up, make little hums or whatever, and never did. Never. I just happen to have very deep sleeping wives, so
Well,
there's been a couple of them.
were you in fear when that was happening? Did you feel as if something was around you, or like right there with you, or was that the dream happening at the same time?
No, no, I know. I was plenty. I was. It was like I was being almost forced into the sleep state, but I was awake. So I wasn't really awake, but I wasn't asleep either. I was like, I was stuck. But the only thing that broke this repetition for me was when I learned how to break out of it, and the only thing that worked, and it took Herculean type effort, but
Hmm.
it was to move a finger just a little, And if I could do that, I could anchor on that and then work hard to get the whole finger to move and then another finger with it. And I would keep doing and expanding it over until it reached my arm and I could move my arm. And then I would, kind of like work it through my body.
Wow.
Once I learned how to do that and did it several times, it never came back again. It was almost like a rite of passage, for lack of a better term. Like I had to learn how to beat that. And I did. And since then, I've not had sleep paralysis since.
Wow.
Awesome. You know, I've
Because
heard several people that have said that they had to learn how to defeat that when they were in that state of sleep paralysis. It's pretty fascinating.
Hmm.
You don't hear that very often.
No, but I mean, even the dream thing, when that man kept coming, it was like another thing that was almost like a rite of passage. Like I had to get through that. I had to keep fighting against it, and then it was like I hit a finish line of sorts. Sleep paralysis. I learned how to break it, and that was maybe something. I don't pretend to know what the big picture of it is, but perhaps maybe it's learning to control myself better. I don't know, because I like to think that as wild as these things are, everything happens within the will of God. It's still within the will of God, and maybe these things try to exploit it, and they come in, they try to pervert it and change it and alter it, but it's always being mindful of the divine and its eternal love in my life, and that nothing happens that isn't within the purview of the divine father, in my eyes. So I think that foundation really pulled me through a lot of it, just knowing that that no matter what this stuff was, and I can't pretend to know, but whatever it was, I was connected to something so much greater, so much bigger, so much more powerful. And all of these parlor tricks didn't matter in the end because I was loved, I was protected, I was redeemed, all of those things. So,
Like the shadow figures, a lot of times I've dealt with a lot of people, um, especially people that have been diagnosed schizophrenic,
mm,
that have and not just people that's schizophrenic, but people that are artists, people that are musicians, that have something that used to be looked at as a mental health condition that was known as pareidolia, which that's where you can see faces in the clouds and in the grass and people in the trees. And I mean, you can see different images, and that's how people paint abstract art. They can see various things in the art that they paint. And it's now just a psychological phenomenon. It's not considered a disorder anymore.
oh, it's
Um,
real. I
it
see
is real.
that.
I do too. I do too. I thought I was when I first experienced that. When I first went to school, when I was in graduate school studying about the brain and the many functions of the brain, I thought, wow, maybe there's nothing wrong with me after all. Maybe I can convince my wife of that. But sometimes, like with shadow people, there are neurological factors that go into. There's certain medical conditions like schizophrenia, temporal lobe epilepsy, that can produce hallucinations or shadowy figures, but it doesn't happen to two and three and four people in a row or thousands of people that I've heard talk about this shadow man.
mhm,
There's been thousands of people that have seen him and had experiences and encounters with him. So it's very real. And it's not, every time I've never heard a story, Brent, about this shadow man that's ever been positive. It's always been a negative encounter with him.
yeah,
Uh, he used to plague. There was a young girl in our church where I first started ministering back, 34 years ago. Um, there was a young girl in our church that was plagued by him. He used to stand underneath a bridge and would be watching her as she came out of the church. I
right,
mean, he plagued her, and they finally went over and blessed the house and prayed, and he left her alone after that. Um, but that's something that really intrigues me, and I've not really done as much study on him as I should, I think, and I'm going to really research that. That's really lit a fire under me, so to speak.
mhm,
Um, but it's fascinating to see how many people are starting to come forward and talk about their experiences on platforms like this, where they feel comfortable and they feel like it's a safe space where they can talk about these things. Because used to it was taboo. You couldn't talk about
Right.
things like this. People thought you
Yeah.
were crazy and just laughed at you and just wrote you off as being, you know, out there, so to speak. But I'm glad we have platforms like this where we can talk about it.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was weird. Like when I was doing looking for people that had possibly seen what we had seen here. I remember I was at the little store. I mean, I have several people that are on the documentary that talk about what they've seen, but there was more people that would not come on camera to talk about it. But they told me their stories, and it was exactly the same person that I drew, and we all three or four of us have seen him, but only it was this one. Well, several was right. They're all in the same kind of area in this country town, but one of them, the guy was literally walking down her road, looking, the shadow man walking on the dirt road thing. And then he got right up to the, like where the house was, and then he just disappeared. But he was like there. I mean, he was literally like a real person walking with the black hat and everything.
Wow.
And a bunch of stuff happened in that house but they would not get come on camera to talk about it, which I don't blame them. But
Yeah.
um, it happened a lot. So yeah, that would be, yeah. It's I don't even really like talking about him because it was so much horrible stuff. But um, I think it's important that we do talk about it, because if we don't, then it's like it just gets into our own psyche, and we can't really get it out and we can't discuss it. So I think you're right, Bishop Joshua. It's good to have platforms like this and Brent's paranormal portal. And speaking of which, it's already like 8, or like it's been 15 minutes over.
Wow. And I was just getting started.
I
What?
Well,
know we did start like 15 minutes.
actually,
But,
according to the play clock, we've only been on for 56 minutes. I know we're
oh,
over on the time, but we got started a little bit late, so we're
right.
we're right in the perimeters of time.
Right.
Uh,
Well, did I
He's
really
got to
want
come. We got to have Brent come back. We've not even scratched the surface of anything we really want to talk about tonight, but he's been
like
phenomenal. You were
did
right
we
about him. I'm so glad and so blessed to have met him.
did we talk about the cryptids and the Bigfoot? Because I know we were talking about that before the show actually came on the second time. Because that was really great. I mean, there was one thing I would like to talk about real quick. I don't know if we have enough time, but Brent, remember that time when you were telling me that you saw something flying in the air when you were like a teenager, and you and your friend were running, and like you were in this area and there was something in the air? Do you remember?
no, no, I was growled at.
Oh, it was growled at. I was thinking it
Yeah.
was flying in the air.
No,
I'm just making the whole story up. No, this was you were growled at. Oh,
no,
sorry.
I was growled at. Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's the one time when I've been really close to a Bigfoot. And at
Okay.
the time I was only 14 years old and didn't really have a concept of Bigfoot being anywhere but in the Pacific Northwest. And I'm from Minnesota, so I'm back in Minnesota. Yeah, take your time. Oh, thanks. Oh, good. He said it. Um,
3 hours later.
better pack a sandwich because we're going to be at it. Um, So the story goes, I grew up in a rural part of Minnesota in area along the banks of the Mississippi River, but right behind my house where I grew up, which was basically on the shores of the Mississippi, but behind my house was a state forest. It was a big bluff behind our house, and it was called Rattlesnake Bluff. Still is called Rattlesnake Bluff, if you believe that. But I never saw a rattlesnake, just for the record. But it was called that, so I
Well,
heard them. Never
hence the
saw.
name Bluff.
That's I see that. Gotcha. So anyway, I grew up in this area, and we would spend all of our time up on that bluff. That was like our playground. Go up and hike through the woods and just dork around, rolling boulders down and stuff, just like kids do. It was where we got away and just, I don't know, we're kids. We didn't have a playground. We had the forest, so that's what we used. But my friend was a year older than me. I'm about 14. He was 15. And so he came during the summer, and nobody was around most of the time. I was mostly just entertaining myself in the woods or on the beach or whatever. But when he came, it was always a blast because he was my age ish, and we got along great. So we went for a hike up on the bluff, and we were going up there, and we got up there, and it's not necessarily like precarious climbing, but it's you got to be careful because you're going up rocky ravines with loose rocks, and there's some spots that are pretty tricky, and you navigate them, you take your time. But we're up on the forest all day having a great time. We're like, oh, we better start getting back down, it's getting late. And so we started working our way down. Now this is not this forest is an old forest, but it's not like really dense. Like, oh, I couldn't see anything around me. You can see everywhere. Like there's plenty of trees and stuff, but those old growth forests, they're pretty open. You feel like you're in a leafy park more than anything because there's lots of scrub, lots of beauty all around you, but it's not like you're just wall to wall foliage and Percy Fawcett's hacking his way through. So we decide, well, let's get down, and before the night comes, because you don't want to be trapped up there in the night, because you have no light. You're just going to be the Braille method of hiking, which is like feel. And that I've done that. That was scary. So we decided to make sure we got down in plenty of time. So we're working our way back down and we're going down a ravine. It's like a dry run. There was only ever water running in the spring melt off. It's not like it was spring fed and it was always a stream, but it looks like a dry creek bed. And we're working our way down, and we got to a point, maybe a third of the way down, and we kind of just stopped there, and we're like kind of plotting our course, just taking a breather as we're working our way down this huge bluff. And we're standing there, and suddenly we're both standing right on the edge of like a drop off with rocks below us and stuff, and suddenly and I'm just spitballing the measurements just from memory, but it wasn't far behind us, but it seemed like it was right behind us and taller than us by a lot, is this deep rumbling growl. And I'm telling you, my hand to God, my body vibrated as much as I was actually hearing the noise. It was like it shook me. It was like being resonated, like, and I was beside myself in terror because I had no concept of what that could be. The biggest thing we had was white-tailed deer. I mean, there were coyote and occasional coyote and raccoons and fox, but everything was small fauna other than the deer. They were the biggest thing going on there. But deer don't growl. Well, whatever was rumbling this noise was just so powerful and so big, and it was right behind us. And I froze. Now, a lot of times you hear from people in Bigfoot stories, I couldn't move. I could not move. I wanted to move. I couldn't move. I could have moved, but whatever was making that sound, I was convinced I was a moment away from being killed. And I didn't dare do anything to hurry that along. Now, I could have turned and looked, but I thought I was about to die, and I didn't want to see what that looked like as it came to kill me. Like, I didn't want that to be the last thing I experienced in this life. I'm just frozen. Like, oh my God. But it's standing there growling. We're standing there frozen. And he froze just like I did. We both didn't move a muscle. We just stayed there. It growled and growled. And then I finally said to him, I said, what is that? And he goes, I don't know, but we got to get the hell out of here. And we did the only thing we could do. Like, there's fight and flight. Whatever was making that sound was way out of my fight category. At 14, you kind of get this idea. I'm kind of a man. I'm kind of a manly man. I was suddenly an infant. I was just, wanted to curl up in the fetal position. I was small. I was tiny. I was vulnerable. Whatever was making this noise was just larger than life. It was just huge and making this deep rumbling growl. So we did the only thing that was left, which is flight. And we ran down this hill. We ran down this hill. How we didn't break ourselves in 15 pieces, I don't know, but we made it. And whatever that noise was making, that noise did not follow. But I was stuck with that for years. It killed the forest for me for a few years. Like, I just didn't even want to go in there. All of a sudden that went from my playground to like, hell no, I'm not going in that place. And it was right next to my house. That was the only thing I had to do. But I carried it for years. and no concept of what it is. I never ever heard stories of Bigfoot in that area, any kind of cryptids. I didn't know that was possible. I knew about Bigfoot because Leonard Nimoy on In Search of said it was in the Pacific Northwest. That was out here where I live now, not back there. And so I just had this block in, not no idea what it was, just knew that it was the most terrified I've ever been, to still to this day, the most terrified I've ever been in my whole life. And I just carried it with me. And I'll tell you, it wasn't until I was a little bit older, well, quite a bit older, actually, my 20s, I guess, when the first Jurassic Park movie came out. And there was one moment in that movie that brought me back to that very moment. And that was when those kids are stuck in that broken down little SUV, and the adults are in the next one, and they're sitting there, and they got the T-Rex comes out, and when it comes down and puts its eye in the window next to those kids, and it's like, and it was like all of a sudden that memory just came flooding back, like, oh, I know what that's like, and I was reliving that moment, and I still didn't know what to do with it, but it was like, I don't think it's T-Rexes. I don't think there was a T-Rex in the forest. So I still didn't know what to do with it. And it wasn't until much later, when Finding Bigfoot came out, was when I really started to go through the gateway of what is Bigfoot and all this stuff. And I started to learn the signs and things that are attributed to them. I started to learn about vocalizations. And I started to learn that they weren't just in the Pacific Northwest. They were everywhere. Everywhere. This is like the most successful organism on the face of the planet. Bigfoot is, bar none. And some people say, well, humans are very successful. No, we can recreate our comfort wherever we go. But these things can be in mountains, they can be in swamps, they can be in deserts, they can be any ecological region of this planet and thrive. And so I found out they were everywhere. And then it was just like, oh my God, maybe it was a Bigfoot. And so then, after having that knowledge, I was doing a product shot for a company I used to work for, still living in Minnesota. And I went back up into those woods because I was putting survival products out in the natural area, taking photos of them for advertisements. And I was like, I had a gut feeling like, I know I'm supposed to go up higher here. We're supposed to keep going. I have my eldest son, Sheldon, with me. He was about 16 at the time, maybe 17. And he's like, well, I don't know, should we? And I'm like, yeah, we should go up higher. I really want to go up higher. I don't know why. And so we went up. There was like, it's not like a steep grade. It's like a gradual embankment up the side of this bluff where we're at. The hiking story is about 2 miles down in a very rocky part, but we're in a very gradual part. And I'm like, all you can see is like all these trees. And then there's like huge ancient boulders of limestone just sitting there like a wall. And I was like, I want to go up there. I got to see what's up there. And so we went up there, and that's where I found the first structure I ever saw in my life on the other side of those boulders, which created a perfect blind spot. And it wasn't like a teepee structure like everybody talks about. It was more of a dugout. It was dug out behind the boulder. It was like everything was dug out, and then these broken logs and old wood was kind of just laid over the top of this dugout. And I was like, oh my God. That could have been where they slept or where they stayed or whatever. And and then I found a maple sapling that was about, I don't know, 6-8 inches around. So it's, very young, but very pliable. And that thing was snapped off about 4 feet above the ground with no deadfall anywhere near it. It was just snapped off and laying there. Like, well, what the hell did that? Again, it's an old forest, but it's not like so dense and you can't see everything. I could look all around and see that nothing made that break. And then on the ground, I found one thing that I'm pretty sure it was there moments before we were. And that was, I found another maple sapling. It was a branch, and it was broken on both ends. But it was stripped of all the bark, as if something was eating that bark off of there like a banana. And it was still tacky to the touch when I picked it up. Well, again, I've lived in this area my whole life. Squirrels don't do that. They don't break off saplings and strip the bark. Deer will probably chew on the bark and stuff, but it wouldn't look like that. And I'm thinking, oh my God, all this time, what I might have experienced was a close encounter with a Bigfoot. So That's my Bigfoot story.
That's awesome.
Wow.
That's awesome. Kind of reminds me, I was preaching a revival in a place called Petersburg, West Virginia, which is along the Virginia border. And there was a mountain in this, it's a rural area, and there was a mountain that we climbed, me and another preacher friend, to go pray. We went about 5,000 feet up this
Ooh.
mountain. And as we got to the midway point of this mountain, we found every little trail that you could go up there was rock formations. It started out with a bigger rock and then went all the way up to the smallest of rocks. And there's no way a person could have lifted these huge rocks.
Ooh.
So as we're going up, we go up to pray. And we got up to the top of this mountain and you could hear vocalizations. And they were throwing rocks at us, pebbles. Just throwing them just to let us know that they were in the area. And he came to me, he said, "Brother, did you hear that?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "You know what that is, right?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." So letting us know that they're here. Of course, we didn't feel, any kind of aggressive behavior from them. We wasn't afraid or anything. We continued to pray, had a really, really wonderful time of prayer.
Oh, cool.
In that mountain, but they were letting us know that they were the protectors of that mountain.
Yep.
And that they were there, they were present. And
Yep.
I thought it was fascinating because we saw these rock formations. In town, not too far away from here, in a town about 30 minutes from here, right behind an apartment complex where I was doing some work, there were large rocks in this creek bed. There was about 7 of them. And the maintenance guy, he was like, "There's no way the kids could have lifted those and put those in that creek bed. What do you think done that?" And I said, "I know what, and that you think I'm crazy." He said, No, I won't. "What do you think did that?" And I said, "Well, it was Bigfoot." He said, "Oh, come on, man." I said, "I told you he was going to think I was crazy." But I've seen those rock formations a lot. And how that they use those as markers, and and I've seen different things like you talked about, bedding areas, archways, X's, pointer markers, tree limbs put in other trees pointing different directions. And it's all fascinating. It's a great opportunity when you go out in the woods to pay attention, to look around you, to see what you can see, because you may see something spectacular. We live in a world that's so small, and we've got blinders on, and we can only see a certain distance from our face, but if you open that up and look around you, you'll see some things that are unexplainable, but things that are very fascinating and magnificent in the woods. And every time I go out, I try to keep my eyes open and my mind open, because you never know what you're going to see.
Right. And the interesting thing is that going back up into those woods and going back on subsequent visits to those woods, and up here in the north of Idaho, I found a beautiful dome-like structure up here once. That was something I and Don, my friend, went and checked out. But you can walk by the signs without seeing them. I had my whole life. I'd been playing up and down this bluff. But once I learned what signs are attributed to them, I saw them everywhere on this bluff. It's like, well, nobody told me. I didn't know. And I guess they were used to us if they were there. And I don't know that they're there all the time. But again, as we were talking prior to recording or going live, I think they have a range. And they work their way through this area. My brother has a story that was puzzling him, and he doesn't really know or have much time for the idea of Bigfoot, but he had got this deer, and he said, "I got a good shot on it, a long shot," and he went and followed the blood trail, and he said it was just coming out. It was coming out a lot of blood, so he knew it was just a matter of a few steps he should be seeing it. And he said he got into this really thick area, and the blood trail stopped, but there was nothing there. Now, some people might say, well, probably another hunter found it and took it, but they would field dress it. They wouldn't haul it out with all of the extra weight. They would field dress it, and there would be a gut pile at least if somebody else found it. There was no drag marks. There was nothing. It was like this thing was just levitated off into nowhere. He said, and
he thought he shot it.
He did. No, he shot the buck. The deer. He was deer hunting, and he was following the blood trail to, because it ran after he shot it, but he knew he got it good because it was really bleeding. And then the blood trail stopped, and there was nothing there. It was just like it would just like it evaporated at that point. And I'm like, oh, I think I know what happened.
Well, maybe Bigfoot's like Harry off Harry the Hendersons. Maybe he took the deer and doctored it and healed it.
Oh yeah, no, I don't think he doctored this one, but he probably had some sandwiches.
That'd be a good show to watch, Harry and the Hendersons. I haven't seen
I
that.
love that show.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
cool one.
Well, I was watching Orbis Paranormal just a few minutes before. They came on at 4 my time, and I can't remember the guy's name, but it was really a very interesting talk. He was talking about how these the Bigfoot, or like on one, he said he'll take people to this place, and one side he says is usually Bigfoot, and the other side would be dogmen. And so the question was like, that's unusual, like, but that's what he's encountered. And they were talking about how they, that they can just appear and then just disappear and different things. So I just think that's just a commonality, like, say, for instance, what happened to the deer? Well, or do you think maybe it came from a portal and got the deer and took it?
I think he grabbed it and just took it off, but he would, anybody who was grabbing that deer would have had to drag it. So he was looking for any sign of it being drug out of that area, that thicket. But if something
That just picked it up.
some big could have just picked it up and carried it off,
And walked right into the thicket. I've heard of him picking 300-pound hogs up and carrying them like it ain't nothing.
Yeah, one arm. Yep, like a football.
Mm-hmm.
The pigskin.
Big pigskin. That's right.
Yep.
Well, you guys, we probably should wrap it up. It's been so wonderful, but I'm glad we got to talk about this, this subject, because I know that's important. And I'm so glad that you two have met now, because I think that's important.
We need to have Brent back. We need to get him
back.
back.
Have you back, Brent?
Anytime. Just let me know when. If I can swing it, I'll be here.
Awesome.
Hey, I think I heard Joe come in. Joe, are you here? He comes in every single time when we wrap the show up. You want to say hi, Brent?
Timing.
Hi, everybody. Hi.
So there's
Hey,
Brent.
Joe.
Hey.
Brent.
Hey, Joe.
That's Joe.
Just,
It's
Good to see
Joshua.
you.
Hi, everybody.
Joe's amazing.
He's trying to be quiet in there in the kitchen. I can hear some pans. The dogs are being very good right now. Yay, dogs. Anyway, I'm so glad he could pop in.
Yeah, that's nice. Very, very talented guy. Oh my God.
He is. We're so proud of him. He's doing so good with that Tucson. So anybody looking, Tucson Botanical Gardens. There's a show called Beautiful Spirit Interactive Art in Motion. And that is Joe's show in our 501c3.
Is that when the butterfly? Is that when the butterflies?
The butterfly.
Wow, brilliant.
There's a dragonfly.
Yeah, that was so beautiful. I was like, wow.
He's
a keeper.
Yeah. Well,
He's fun to be around in person too.
We got to meet Brent. We all went. So Bishop Joshua was when I went to Connecticut, and so we did Defeating the Demonic, and some of the Unseen Realm was there, and so I already knew brother, not gonna call him brother, but Bill Bean.
Mm-hmm.
And know Bill Bean, don't you?
I know of Bill. I think I've been on a show with him, but I've never really had the opportunity to talk to him. But
so it was neat because Joe got to come and we all got to meet. We actually got to meet. It was so fun to meet the people. Like, when I ever get to meet you, it's going to be great too, Brent. Someday in person.
Yeah.
But to see Bishop Joshua and give him a big hug was great.
Yeah, that will be wonderful.
Anyway, look, thank you, Mac Basics. That's an interesting picture of that Mac cat. Hey, Joe.
Mac, that's my youngest son.
Oh, is it?
It's Mac.
Yeah.
Oh, it's Mac. We met him in Connecticut.
Are the cat ears from his mom then?
Yes.
He gets the cat ears from his mom? Okay.
He gets the beard from her as well. I shave my beard. I usually have a beard. I was going I was going to get a shirt that said, if your dad doesn't have a beard, you have two moms, but I shaved my beard off. So
when we first met him, he had a big beard.
Oh, wow. There you
And
go.
then he
Really
showed,
long.
yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on the Explaining the Unexplainable show, Brent. You've helped really
Yes.
bring out some unexplainable explanations.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me on. I obviously love talking about this stuff, so every chance I get, I take it. I'll definitely come back if you want me. I'm
Yeah,
just
we
saying.
definitely want you back. You have to come.
Yay! That'd
I
be
mean,
good.
no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
You got it, brother.
You
Just
gotta
let me know when. You
Okay.
know, it's perfect because I call everybody brother anyway. So
You're my brother, so
we're brothers now. That's it.
It's so
that's right.
great to have so many brothers. It's fun. It was weird at first calling people brother, but now I'm just like, hey, brother. I like it. Brent is the man. Look,
Oh,
Mac likes you.
thanks,
Cool.
Mac. Appreciate it, brother.
Mac, wait till you see Paranormal Portal. It is just the coolest. It's just one of my favorite shows. I try to tune in and catch it, anytime he's on, just even for a few minutes. That's how much I love the Paranormal Portal. So everybody, tell everybody how they can find you on the Paranormal Portal again, please.
Yeah, so I do live shows and these are more variety shows where I cover a lot of different stuff. I cover the news and usually some spiritual ghostly stuff, some cryptid stuff, and throw in a smattering of UFOs on every episode. And so that's the 2 hour shows that are on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook Live, X, Twitch. They're streaming live on all of those platforms. And then I do a podcast, which is available everywhere, Spotify, iTunes, iHeart, Pandora, Google Play, Castbox, Stitcher, any of them. I can go on and on, but it's all out there. But that's a weekly show that I do. That's generally more interview based. I like to have fun on the live streams. I do a lot of laughing and having fun. Not that we're taking the material lightly, but we just like to have a good time. And it's a very community driven show. I have a wonderful core audience of people that show up for every show, and we have a good time. But the podcasts are more straightforward, interview based, very thoughtful, and I've had some amazing guests on there. So that's where you can catch me. Go to paranormalportal.net, and that'll plug you into everything I got cooking.
He's
Awesome.
got great music too. He's also a really great musician. So all the music you hear is Brent's music, which I love all that. And you can also find Brent on Coast to Coast, and he's actually interviewed George Norrie himself on his show, which I
Yeah.
think is pretty big. And
Nice.
and then George Norrie interviewed him, and they're both really great interviews. They really are. Listen to both of them. So anyway, thank you so much. And Bishop Joshua, do you want to talk a little bit and say what you're doing, like this Saturday, maybe on the Unseen Realm?
Yeah, come and be with us on the Unseen Realm on Saturdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. Pacific, where we talk about everything that goes bump in the night. If you have any questions, you're experiencing any kind of demonic oppression, possession, obsession, come and bring your questions. We'll do a quick assessment. Allow the Lord to give us discernment as we talk with you, and try to help you. That's our ministry, is a ministry of helps. It's not just a ministry of deliverance, but a ministry of helps as well. Being an exorcist is a lot more than just going in and doing the ritual and performing the exorcism. It's about investigation, much like in the paranormal world. And our assessment's very big. We talk about it a lot. So join us, Sunday or Saturdays, not Sundays,
Yeah,
Saturday.
Saturday.
Sundays in some time zones where they watch us. But join us Saturday evenings at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific on the Unseen Realm. You won't be disappointed. I promise you that. And I know you won't be disappointed if you go check out Brent on all of his platforms, making sure you like, subscribe, tell him where you heard about him. That way he can know that he's getting out there on our platform as well. And that helps us to know that we're getting out there as well on our platform. So go smash the like button on everything he does, subscribe to every channel he has, and show him some love. Okay? Please do that for me.
Thank you, everybody. God bless. And thank you, Brent. God bless you.
Oh, snap. Thank you. Bless you both. I really had a lot of fun, and looking forward to the next visit.
Absolutely.
All right.
Well, everybody, you have a wonderful evening, and thank you for joining us here on Explaining the Unexplainable. I'm Bishop Josh, and this is my sweet sister Mercedes. And we love you, Good night from Kentucky.
Night from Arizona.